In 1971, Ron Morehead and Al Berry headed into the wilds of the Sierra Nevada mountains, a 400-mile-long range which stretches from California's Central Valley to the Great Basin. Morehead was a believer, an author and researcher actively seeking his dream of discovering the unknown creature that modern Americans refer to as Bigfoot. Berry, however, was a researcher taking a hardcore skeptic standpoint. He was a journalist who joined Morehead into the mountains expecting to find evidence of a hoax. Their trip would not be uneventful. Exactly what it is they found on their expedition to this day has not been determined, but we do know one thing: it's absolutely terrifying. Amidst the inky blackness of night, this huge stretch of uneven terrain, compact forest and unspoiled wilderness would give rise to what believers and skeptics alike to this day refer to as among the greatest pieces of cryptid evidence ever recorded. They're known as the Sierra Sounds. In this, our very first episode, we're going to be taking you into the heart of the Sierra Nevada mountains ourselves to bring you face to face with whatever it was that made those terrifying noises in the dead of the Californian night. I'm Tom, this is Niall, and welcome to the Campfire Archives. So Niall, this is the case that got us talking about all this stuff in the first place.
It absolutely is. We were on a stag do in Portugal, if I'm not mistaken, and it was about 3 a.m, and I think this is when we both realised that we had this shared interest in this kind of thing. For me, I'd never really considered Bigfoot and the reality of it and the possibility of it being a real thing. I'm not saying I necessarily do now, but still, this was the first time it piqued my interest a little bit, and I thought, wow, actually, there might be something in this.
I think I can say the same. I think until you hear these stories, you don't really consider there being anything out there that we don't know of in terms of animals or biological anomalies that we can't explain.
Absolutely.
But this really, really changed my view on how much we possibly know about the natural world.
100%. There's just something about it that feels so unique. Without spoiling it, I'll let you get into it, but it's a really, really interesting one.
Without further ado, we'll get into the story. So, the exact location of where Morehead and Berry made these recordings has not been completely disclosed, as far as I'm aware, but they supposedly followed a trail around 40 miles east of Sonora off of Highway 108. They hiked several miles into the mountains, initially settled down around a deer hunting campsite near a spot called Eagle Meadows, which is a rugged, densely forested area quite near to a gently flowing creek with some wooded overhangs. Here they built a sturdy shelter out of thick fallen timber and began their vigil for the night. So Morehead and Berry had been making semi-frequent trips to the area throughout the year of 1970. They'd returned on several occasions. The first few trips yielded no or very few strange sounds, but the pair reportedly found large, semi-human footprints in the sand around Sierra Nevada's water sources. These footprints were human, but not quite. So they were large, very strange, nothing like you would see from any of the local wildlife, bears, wolves, deer. In the end, around 80 minutes of audio footage was captured in the Sierra Sounds. The first few audio recordings are by far the most intriguing. The sounds you'll be hearing throughout this podcast are the original undoctored Sierra Sounds recordings from Morehead and Berry's first few trips into the mountains. On one of the first nights on the trail, they began to hear what appeared to be knocking on the wood and rocks coming from the ridge just above them. And the creek down below as well. The knocking, however, was far louder than any human would be possibly capable of making on their own. It appeared that these animals were picking up a huge log or a stick and just whacking it into the side of the tree. Really unsettling. That same night, Berry in particular would be shocked at the onset of what sounded almost like voices coming from the trees. Voices that Berry would claim carried through the trees as I have never heard human voices carry before or since. These vocalisations were interspersed with whoops and whistles, described by the hardcore skeptic as beautiful, like something a bird might make. Supposedly whatever was making these noises was doing so for each other's benefit in what really truly sounded like some bizarre, unearthly, primal conversation. Over the next few days, the noises would commence time and time again in the dead of night. Creatures that sounded almost human, speaking to one another in an unrecognisable tongue, volumes and pitches seemingly unachievable by human vocal cords. This time, however, the duo were able to capture an audio recording, and as usual, at first came the knocking.
We're in for a night view.
So the knocking sounds, this is a common claim from those who have supposedly heard Bigfoot or seen Bigfoot in the woods. They claim that these huge animals pick up sticks or logs or branches and they just smack them against trees and rocks. And it's like a kind of a loud, carrying, hollow sound. And you can really tell how kind of far it seems to carry in the footage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to be said on this. Firstly, I love the setup of this story. It's my favourite kind of story. You have a skeptic and you have someone who believes. And the skeptic is there to disprove the existence of Bigfoot. Great. I love that, because I would argue you can just trust it a little bit more, these accounts, than if it was just a bunch of people who are maybe high on their own supply and all out there very keen to prove Bigfoot existed. You see the footprints, they hear the noises, they have all these experiences, but they don't record it the first time, which again you'd expect to be true. And then they hear it again, and that's the recording that we get. The sounds in that are so unusual to me. I think about the knocking of wood on the tree. It just sounds like a huge branch being smashed against a tree with a huge echo. Just listening to it, I mean, I could be wrong, but the strength needed to do that, to me, you can pick up on it in the recording. It's insanity.
It almost sounds like somebody taking a baseball bat and just smacking a piece of metal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like a really thick, big baseball bat and just hoofing it against a tree. And you can hear it echoing, like you say, throughout the woods. But for me anyway, I just get the impression that whatever was making these noises was huge. It was something really strong and something really big. It just sounds like so much force to me.
It feels like it would need a ridiculous amount of upper body strength just to be able to even pick up the object that feels like, you know, how big it is. It's ridiculous. Yeah,
absolutely.
So before long, whatever or whoever was making these knocking sounds progressed to the usual whooping and whistling noises heard the previous nights. So they do sound, I would say, primate-like, the kind of noises you'd expect a chimp to make. When you listen to them, though, just pay attention to how immensely powerful they sound. It's as though they're being like blasted out of the diaphragm of whatever's making them, like a really deep, powerful launching sound. Without further ado, here they are. So the whooping sounds, no animal in the North American forests can replicate those. The largest animals in those woods are bears, which simply don't make those noises. They sound like they cut right through you, just even when listening to the audio recording, so God knows how it felt to be there on the night.
Absolutely. And I don't want to, again, just keep feeding into this necessarily being Bigfoot, but it sounds like a monkey to me. It sounds like some kind of big monkey making these whoops that you'd almost hear like monkeys in the rainforests make, but just on a much larger scale. It just has a very primate quality to it, to me.
Definitely doesn't sound like anything that would come out of the North American pine forests. It's, you know, deer, bears, they all kind of make grunting, roaring kind of sounds. It doesn't sound anything like that, especially on that first level where it's just whistles and whooping. It feels primate.
Absolutely. And like you said before, you can hear them projecting this from deep down in the diaphragm. You know, there's clearly a lot of force there, hoofing this out across the woods and the forests. Yeah, really unusual and unsettling, I think.
But soon, however, the whooping slowly morphs into something stranger still, as it had done the previous nights. So these creatures, whatever they are, they start making what sounds like words of a coherent yet unknown language. These noises begin to fade in slowly, and it's nothing short of terrifying. I mean, we were kind of shocked when we first heard this. It's really, really odd. Berry and Morehead even attempted to converse with the beings in the video. In some instances, they even seem to respond. So without further ado, let's take a listen to the languages.
Which one's obvious?
That's our deal. Now we know where we can look for tracks and all that for sure. There's two of them across the creek at the big rocks. It's a hard act to follow.
It sounds like he talks to us and they talk to each other.
Yeah. Right there, I just seen movement right through there.
I think that's by far the most terrifying aspect of this whole case, even if it is just human. I mean, why would people be out there in the dead of night? It really brings home that whatever is making these noises, even if it is a person, is intelligent. It can form language. What are your thoughts?
Well, again, I think it's good to remember the context of this, that we have a skeptic here who his aim is to disprove the existence of Bigfoot. So I like to think, safe to say, he hasn't got someone in on this with him, trying to manipulate this recording or what have you. But perhaps the most compelling evidence for me, because I came at this from very much a position of not really believing in Bigfoot, or kind of seeing it as a bit of a joke, to be honest, before you played this for me. For me, the greatest evidence was how I felt listening to this part of the recording. I have I can't think of a better way to describe it other than a primal reaction to these noises. It makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I feel like I'm listening to something that is a predator, something that I should be terrified of. Something about those noises, they're just in an uncanny valley for me.
It feels like almost an evolutionary response, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I'm getting it a little bit now, again, reliving it, but it's like it's not quite human, but it's something close to human, and that is terrifying. Something about it just invokes a real kind of reptile brain response for me. And that for me was what was most compelling about listening to this when you first played it for me.
I feel like it's something that you can imagine hearing from like inside a cave in the middle of the Ice Age. It's something that I'm not going in that cave. Like we'll just find somewhere else.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, as a kind of aside to that, one thing that made me think maybe this is all a joke and you know, a bit of a scam is that if I was in their shoes, not in a million years would I dare to try and converse with whatever this is out there. I would be keeping deathly silent.
It's not like they do it subtly either. They're shouting out at these things.
They're fully trying to engage them in conversation.
And they can't see them.
No.
So they've no idea what it is that's making, well, they believe it's Bigfoot, or one of them does. But, I mean...
Maybe that's why, because, you know, the skeptic, in his mind, he probably thinks this is just something fairly mundane. A couple of his mates, exactly.
Yeah, so a few additional points on the language, which are things that I've seen pointed out on forums and YouTube comments. A couple of things that I've picked up on. So it's often referred to, or these sounds are often referred to as samurai chatter on account of the language vocalizations sounding similar to the old black and white Japanese samurai films from the 50s and 60s, and crossing over kind of into East Asian languages as well. Some have picked up similarities to Chinese and Japanese within those vocalizations themselves. So at one point in the video, around the 3.5 minute mark, it sounds like one of them says ni hao, which means hello in Chinese. That's been picked up by a few listeners, which is responded to by the other creature with hao a, which means okay or sure in Chinese. Before the first creature speaks ni hao, it adds a few more syllables. It's a massive speculative stretch, but could that be a name? Could that be this thing saying, "How you doing, Niall? You're right," and the other one's, "I'm fine."
Yeah, because that's the other thing. Especially if you listen to it a few times, it genuinely starts to sound like they're talking to each other. These don't just feel like random hoots or hollers or what have you.
Sounds like an argument.
It does. It sounds like a heated argument, and one I definitely wouldn't want to get in the middle of.
I mean, Chinese would make kind of sense from a historical standpoint. So in the 1800s, over 20,000 Chinese immigrants were working on the Transcontinental Railroad, which would have run through the Sierra Nevada mountains. There's a running theory in the Bigfoot community, which states that these creatures might have just been watching and listening from the sidelines as these Chinese workers were working on this railroad. That leads us into the vocal mimic theory, that these creatures cannot actually talk, but instead pick up on language they've overheard from people in the woods or those that have seen them. That's kind of backed up by some people at the 3-minute mark, just over 3 minutes in the recording. Some people have interpreted one of the creature's vocalizations as screaming, "Oh my God," in English, or mimicking what those who have seen them might say. I'm not too sure how I feel about that theory, the vocal mimic theory, because at many points throughout this, there are clearly sentences and words that are not coherent to any language. With them being large bipedal apes that are plainly capable of using tools or proto-tools, it would, I guess, from a speculative standpoint, it might make sense for them to also have a language. I'm not sure how I feel about the vocal mimic theory. I think it's maybe a bit of a... I don't know if these creatures do exist, maybe that's not doing them justice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of fun, isn't it? And I suppose you could argue if this railway is being built through what is their habitat, these might well be some of the first humans that these things would encounter, i.e. The Chinese immigrants building this railway. But I don't know, would they ingratiate that so quickly into their own language? And more to the point, would that have lasted then for so long? For, 200 years was it or so? I don't know. I think it's a bit of fun. Again, I know the part you're talking about where he it sounds almost like an "oh my God." But again, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced by it. Like you say, a bit of fun. It's something quite interesting to think about. But I do totally understand why some term it samurai language, because it absolutely, if you listen back to it, has very much that vibe to it. I
think that could just be a case of pareidolia in audio form. You know, people have evolved to spot patterns, human patterns and things that aren't actually there. Is this just a case of us trying to put a human face to these because it's scary?
Absolutely.
Yeah. A couple more points. At the just before 1 minute, what sounds like laughter can be heard in response to when Morehead attempts to mimic the creature.
I hate that particular section.
Horrible.
It's really terrifying. That I don't like it. It sounds so sinister.
It's like it almost sounds like a really clear laugh. It's like it's not a word. It's like an up and down. Like it's a very fluctuating giggle almost.
Absolutely, yeah. Really, really unnerving part of it. That.
And at times as well, around the 3.5 minute mark, it sounds like the creature responds to Morehead with a question in tone, as if it's trying to ask him something back. But obviously, if it spoke English, if it was mimicking his language, you know, maybe we'd hear something coherent. But it's just noise. It's vocal language noise, like something you'd see like a Neanderthal making on a prehistory documentary. So let's kind of move in now to the facts, what we do know. So the sounds have been analysed for upwards of 50 years, and amazingly they've not been debunked yet. There's no concrete answer as to what these are. We know that the audio has not been tampered with. These are the raw sounds that Morehead and Berry recorded in the wilderness. The sounds underwent a year-long evaluation at the University of Wyoming. Researchers there determined that the noises must have been made by a primate, which is important, but they didn't state that it's a human.
Wild. Absolutely wild. A primate in the North American wilderness.
And you can say this for the researchers at the university and for Morehead and Berry themselves. Why would they want to put their reputation on the line?
Especially the skeptic.
Yeah. You've you know, the guy was a journalist. He's a level-headed guy. He was described as a man of good character. Why would he want to jeopardize that by saying that a mythical creature exists when he would, especially at the time in the 70s, he'd be ridiculed?
Absolutely.
Dr. R. Lynn Curlin, professor of electrical engineering at the University of Wyoming, claims that the sounds are not the product of human vocalization. It's been actively stamped out. And then we've got US Navy cryptolinguist and Wentworth College professor Scott Nelson, who has 35 years of experience as a cryptolinguist and speaks 4 languages fluently, determined that whatever is being said in the Sierra sounds represents a discernible language, but not one that is known to us. It's coherent with words. Their language has phonemes, which distinguish one word from another and develop accents. And he said that their language is twice as fast as any known language in most analysed recordings. Therefore, to be able to transcribe it in any way at all, it has to be slowed down. So whatever these creatures are, they can speak this dialect, this language, very fluently.
This is, for me, when it gets really interesting. When you have experts saying, number 1, this is not human. Mm-hmm. Number 2, this is not tampered with. And number 3, this is a language. You know, you have people whose job it is to analyse this stuff, giving us all that information. And isn't there something about the human diaphragm just couldn't apparently replicate these noises? Am I jumping the gun?
No. There's apparently there is not enough force in the human body to be able to produce these sounds. We can't get those vocal ranges. They're supposedly completely outside of our range.
Which makes sense, because on the one hand you have something that sounds like a howler monkey at the very high end of it, and then you have something that sounds like quite a deep voiced, large, you know, human, enormous human at the other. That coupled with the strength to smash this stuff into the trees, it's wild to me.
And I mean, I guess if there was, without the language, maybe at a stretch you could blame some form of animal, a person maybe, but there's no animal in the world, to my knowledge, that makes any noise that could be resembled a coherent language. You have animals that can mimic language, like you've got crows and magpies, but not to that force.
Yeah, and we should probably say at this point, Tom does some work in the area of natural history.
Yeah, I manage a YouTube channel regarding natural history. I'd like to think that I know a little bit.
Yeah, you write a lot of scripts, don't you, for people and stuff?
Yeah.
And you're also very interested in this area. Tom's knowledgeable about it. And just for me as a layman, when I'm listening to it, the more I listen to it, the less it sounds human. Like, I don't think I could in a million years recreate those noises, and certainly not that range of noises.
I think it must have been about 4 years since I first heard this recording, and my stance on it hasn't changed. I think if there is proof that there are things in the natural world that we don't know about, then this is it. Time to kind of split it up into the believer and non-believer arguments now. So those who believe in Bigfoot are pretty confident that this is the real deal. So they think that it's a direct recording of what modern Americans refer to as Bigfoot. I say modern Americans because stories of Bigfoot have been circulating on the North American continent since before Western Europeans arrived. Native Americans had their own tales, and the character or the entity was prevalent in Native American culture. Now, some might say that this is just folklore, it's just tales, it's just stories. There are parts of the Northern American wilderness, especially in the northern regions of Canada and Alaska now, that it's weirder amongst native communities if you haven't had an encounter.
Yeah, it will almost be a case of when, not if, you see one of these things.
And these are the remotest regions of the continent where you've got pine barrens, fields of snow, mountains, stretches of basically nothing. There's no civilization.
Yeah, and that's important to stress. And this isn't something I was aware of until, again, you played me the Sierra Sounds and I started to look into this kind of thing a little bit. There might be hundreds and thousands of miles of thick forested areas where humans just don't go.
Yeah.
Like that, people need to appreciate how huge and vast the American wilderness is, and how it's basically not travelled, often, bar occasional hikers and hunters and what have you. There's plenty of room for something like this to hide, especially if it doesn't have a big population.
I've been to America myself, not these kind of areas, but you can really, you get a sense of scale of the country when you're there. And those who have been to these specific parts of the continent, when they go, they see these huge sprawling views across the mountains and the forests, and they just say, well, yeah, you can kind of see it. You can kind of see how something big might be hiding out there.
Absolutely. And going to what you said before about these more ancient cultures like Native Americans, like Inuits, etc., all having their own experiences with something like this. I note there's always similarities, there's always threads that run through each of these cultures who in theory have never really engaged with each other, and that carries through to modern day experiences, which again I find really interesting. There's always some kind of similar vein running through them all, something that kind of remains consistent about these sightings and experiences, which again I think is really interesting.
And they're not alone as well. So Bigfoot is by no means the only wild man cryptid. You've got there's the Yeti of the Himalayas, there's the Yeren of China, the Yowie of Australia, Orang Pendek in Southeast Asia. These creatures, they crop up all over the globe pretty much. And there's sightings and stories in most native cultures and in a lot of modern cultures as well. Is it really out of the realms of possibility to believe that something is surviving in the most remote areas of the world? Maybe. Leading us on to maybe a believer but a more scientific standpoint is that maybe a relic species of human, possibly Homo sapiens, possibly the Neanderthals, not a Neanderthal but whatever's kind of come from them, has survived through the Ice Age to now, becoming a large plains or woodland dweller. Non-human primates can't speak, so what if Bigfoot, or what we perceive as Bigfoot, is in fact a derived member of the genus Homo, so a person? It's a weird thought. Maybe, again, we're looking on the very speculative side here now. Could these creatures have been hiding out in caves at the end of the Ice Age? Could they have taken shelter from the changing environments and the Homo sapiens hunters to hide away in the most concealed places on Earth? Maybe we see them occasionally as they pop up to forage or to migrate. Who knows? It's a theory that's explored to horrific extent in the movie The Descent. Hopefully it's not like that in real life, but who knows?
Absolutely. I mean, scientists, believe there's lots of different varieties of what effectively is human that have spanned the globe. And part of me thinks, if we're taking that perspective, is it that inconceivable that one of the many different varieties survived? Like you said, somehow survived the Ice Age, maybe by living in caves or somewhere, it was a bit warmer or a bit more mild. Who knows? I don't think it's impossible by any means.
Throughout the Pleistocene, which is the last kind of era or epoch of the Cenozoic era that we're in now, so towards the end, closer to the Ice Age, just before it, there were so many groups of humans. So there was us, there was the Neanderthals, there was the Denisovans, there was Homo erectus, and Homo floresiensis, which was a tiny little species confined to one island in Indonesia. Is it really beyond the realms of possibility that maybe something held on? I don't know. It's not for me to say, but who knows? It could be. Some have interestingly cited, and it's an argument that I don't agree with myself, but some have mentioned a creature called Gigantopithecus, which is a huge fossil ape. It's the largest ape that ever existed, being the source of Bigfoot sightings. So it lived a few thousand years ago in southern China. It weighed between 200 to 300 pounds, resembled a gorilla, but it was closely related to orangutans. I don't believe that a small population of a creature that was going extinct at the end of the Ice Age anyway would be able to migrate into the North American wilderness in time.
What makes you say that? Because it was on its way out anyway?
Yeah, it was specialised to living in bamboo forests.
Right, I see.
Yeah, there's the argument that climate change and possibly overhunting from early humans just destroyed the last of the population. We know that, I think, towards the end of the Ice Age, they were on their last legs anyway, or towards when the climate began to shift during the Ice Age. It was just they were on the way out. So another standpoint from a believer perspective is that Al Berry was a skeptical journalist. We could never find any evidence that he was ever being deceived. He was described, as I said, as a man of great character. He held a Master of Science. Why would you want to risk throwing all that away?
Again, this is what I mean by having that skeptical viewpoint really adds so much credence to it for me, because he'll have been desperate to have proved that Morehead had in some way deceived him here. Hence why we're contacting multiple experts in the field of audiology to try and get them to disprove it, to try and prove that the recording was tampered with, that this was made by humans, Morehead's mates or what have you, I don't know. But it really adds just a lot of weight to it for me.
So moving on now to the skeptic interpretations or the non-believer interpretations. So people who argue against the Sierra Sounds have cited the idea that they were made in a studio. So occasionally throughout the recording, especially throughout the first few segments, you will hear staticky kind of sounds. And in some of the audio recordings that followed, these are slightly more prevalent, and the sounds made by these animals are almost like crisp clear with no background recording of the woods and the birds at night. You can hear that during that first recording, the one that we listened to today, they are in the woods. They are out there.
Absolutely. You can hear the creek bubbling. You can hear quite clearly what is a large outdoor open space when you can hear that reverberation across the trees of them smashing it.
You can hear how far away those sounds are as well. And
absolutely.
Experts have confidently said that these sounds haven't been doctored.
Which again makes me think if you were in on it, because the easiest explanation from a skeptical standpoint, I guess, is that, I don't know, Morehead positioned some of his friends down by this creek. Maybe Berry's in on it. I don't know. But if that was the case, why would you then open yourself up to ridicule by saying, right, we're going to contact the US Navy, was it?
The US Navy cryptolinguist, yep.
And a university to analyse this. Why would you do that? Because if it comes back doctored, or any of these people say, actually, there's something fishy here, you look a fool.
And what would the experts have to gain by lying?
Exactly. Especially the Navy, I would argue.
Some skeptics say that it's nothing more than a prank pulled by a couple of hunting buddies out in the wilderness in order to make money.
I don't buy that for a minute. Although it's the most easy explanation, firstly, the sound itself, the fact we have all these experts, is if Al Berry isn't in on it, what are his hunting buddies tracking them all night?
Yeah.
And are they somehow going unheard and unseen, and are they then positioning themselves at this creek? I just can't buy it, and it just doesn't sound human to me. And that's what the experts say as well. This isn't just my opinion.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound human.
Exactly. It's backed up with compelling evidence. I'm not inclined to believe that it was nothing more than a prank. So a quote now from a skeptic. Karen Stoltz now from Scientific American said that the vocalizations are an amateur impression of how a proto-language might sound if it evolved from non-human primates, so chimps and gorillas. She cites a hoax or misidentification as the likely explanations. A hoax, I feel like we can possibly rule out because of the scientific standpoint, the research.
I would argue.
Misidentification, what are you going to misidentify that as?
Well, does she offer an alternative? 'Cause like you said, it's not a bear. It's not an elk.
You ever heard a bear talk?
Yeah, it's very primate in its sounding. And that's what the expert says as well.
So that kind of brings us to the end of the discussion. I think it's good that these sounds are still being debated and that they're unproved to this day, as it keeps the conversation fresh. If new evidence emerges, then it can genuinely be kind of looked at from a clear standpoint. Absolutely. And it is just a terrifying, intriguing piece of footage. I could listen to it over and over and over again and still feel disturbed.
100%. And in no way am I saying this is irrefutable proof of Bigfoot, or that through listening to this, I'm 100% certain that something exists. But this was the turning point for me, where I started thinking, this could be a thing. There might be something in this. And I think that just shows how powerful it is.
So we really hope that this story has the same effect on you, the listener. It's just the beginning of this bizarre journey into the depths of the unexplained, the unknown, the truly terrifying. There's so many more stories out there that we then dived into after we heard about the Sierra Sounds, and they're just waiting to be told. Whether we can explain them or not, that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they're good stories. We'll see you on the next episode. We are going to be bringing you new stories every week. The strangest things imaginable. We've got stories of cryptids, aliens, unexplained events, unexplained murders, cases of historical eeriness, and we can't wait to have you along for the ride. So thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Campfire Archives. If you'd like to send us a story or just get in touch, you can email hello.campfirearchives@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can follow us on Instagram @campfire_archives. See you next time.